Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham, and joining me today on the line, we have a special guest. She will be competing at Submission Underground 2 against Miesha Tate. She is Jessica Evil Eye. And Jessica, thanks again for coming back on Beyond the Cage.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for always having me, and I appreciate it.
Now, of course, as many fans know, you last competed for the UFC back in September, and unfortunately that fight didn't go your way. So I guess my question is, what led to you competing in an event like this at Submission Underground?
Well, they brought the opportunity to me. I was contacted by who everybody knows is Front Row Brian. Had contacted me, and then Chia, followed up with another contact to talk to me also about it to, make sure I was in. And obviously I said yes. And obviously after my last fight, I was extremely disturbed by the decision, and I've been disturbed by some of my decisions. I can't quite understand why I'm not winning when I feel like I'm doing a lot of things right. I understand that certain things are starting to be weighed upon more in the UFC cage, and that's like takedowns and, obviously controlling the person on the cage, I think is starting to score more points than how many times you significantly strike them. So I wanted to take the year off after the bench fight, and I just felt really just emotionally drained because I felt robbed of it, and I said that I was going to take the year off. The UFC, said it was fine, and then, I was given this opportunity to grapple, and I just felt like it was the right opportunity. It was the right time to do something like this. It's a great opportunity to make some money, get out in front of the fans and show them, what else I'm good at, but, also show to myself.
Now, did you always know you would be competing against Miesha Tate, or did that information come later on?
No, it was pretty much like right up front. Like at first, Brian messaged me something like, "Hey, you want? I have an opportunity for you December 11th," and I didn't message him back. And then, unfortunately, the day that I had kind of got hounded by, Brian as well as, Chael, was unfortunate on a day that I had gotten hit on my motorcycle. So I wasn't around my phone much. I'm okay. I was very, very fortunate to be okay, but they were messaging me, being like, we have to know today. And I was finally able to get back to my phone to both of them and say, guys, hey, look, I'm totally in. Had a terrible, I had a motorcycle accident today. Give me a couple hours. I'll be in touch, but I'm not ignoring, and I'm totally interested.
Now, of course, most fighters, or most fans, I should say, know you more for your striking background. So was this, like you said, just an opportunity to really kind of focus on your grappling game?
Yeah, I mean, I always focus. I think one of the things is, like, I swear to you, like, some people say, like, oh, you need to train more, do this. I train regularly. It's not of a matter of training when it comes to that, because I that's all that I do is train. My life is 100% this, and there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not in the gym at least once or doing something that revolves around it. So for me, it was just a matter of a mindset going into this, that it was a matter of just knowing that we weren't going to strike. Like, it was 100% grappling, and that, I could take some experience from this. I mean, we're actually going to be grappling in a full-size cage, so it'll literally almost be like a fight, but you're not getting the punch. We're just going to be grappling.
Now, of course, Miesha Tate competed recently for the UFC back in November at UFC 205, where not only did she lose her match against Raquel Pennington, she also announced her retirement from the sport of MMA. Having already competed once against her, did that kind of surprise you that she decided to, at least for MMA, to call it a career?
I'm not sold 100% on it being the end for her. I mean, I think that she, has went through a lot emotionally, and, it's hard, like, she was the, champ just a fight ago, and, she lost it, and I'm sure that's got to be hard. I can only imagine. I feel like not having, like, I feel like getting the title then losing it is definitely a hard sell. I don't know what it feels like, because I've never been a champion at that level. I hope I get it and I retire before I ever even have to lose it. But I'm sure it's hard. I'm sure it's hard for her, and I'm sure that right now she's just, forced with a lot of emotion, and maybe this opportunity might give her a chance in her mind to figure out whether or not she wants to still do it too.
Now, I was talking to some friends close to you and said that you've been working a lot with there over in Cleveland with Jeffrey Pelton. I just wanted to kind of talk about what are some of the stuff you've been working on with him.
Well, Jeffrey's actually competing that night against another purple belt, Marcos Daniels. And, Jeffrey, I could say a million things about him. He's a 4-time All-American. He's a 4-time national champ. He trains at my gym. Definitely, he's a great guy. I could continue to say more things about him, but I'm not going to. But he is awesome. He is a great force in my life. I'm so fortunate to have him. Everybody is at the gym, and everybody should be really looking out for this guy when it comes to MMA. And I think that he is just a force to be reckoned with. And I'm so lucky to have him in that sense for my wrestling because I'm learning a lot.
Now, are you already in Portland, or will you be traveling later this week to get over there in Oregon?
Nope, me, him, and Pablo Castro, who is, the head of Strong Style Bras at our camp, we all three are leaving Saturday morning. We get it, we leave Cleveland at 6 o'clock. We get to Portland at 10 o'clock with time change and everything, and then we don't leave till Monday afternoon. So, we'll be able to get there. I mean, the nice thing about this is me and Miesha, there's no weight limit. So, there's no cutting weight. Yet again, it's a perfect opportunity for both of us just to show up and showcase, and it's like a glorified, awesome practice.
Now, even though this isn't an MMA match, do you feel that if you are able to defeat Miesha Tate, that you're kind of even, so to speak, in you guys competing against each other?
I mean, I really don't think about that, if that makes sense. I don't look at it that way. I don't look at it that way. I don't look at it as one for me, one for you, because, this is the first time we've ever grappled together. So this is, brand new. And it's a completely different game plan when you're striking with someone and you're fighting them than you are grappling.
I heard from one of your close friends there that you've been working with a new sports app called FireFan. And he told me to kind of bring that up here, and I was wondering if you could tell the listeners out there a little bit about FireFan and what that's all about.
Goodness, you got the scoop on me. You got a really talking to my roommate? Is my roommate
something like that
talking? Is she telling you all my secrets? Yes, no. Oh my God, I'm so excited about FireFan. The coolest thing about FireFan, and most people don't know, is that it's basically an app that will allow high-profile athletes to be able to make a source of income off of basically just free app. It's a free app that anybody can download. I mean, everybody plays apps and plays games and stuff, and they watch those free little ads to get tokens. Well, if you play with me and you play with other people, Manny Pacquiao's in the game. I mean, we've got Mark Cuban. You've got Michael Jordan. I mean, I could literally list so many names, as well as me being one of the top-level MVPs that basically got involved in this app to help promote it. That, there is a little bit of financial gain for us on our app, but it's free. It's free to everybody. It's free to the average person to come in and see what their sport knowledge is against me. So say I decide to play fantasy football. It's very similar to that. Fantasy football, you create a team, you play against me, and I play against you. And unfortunately, the UFC is not in it right now, but it will be, and eventually you'll be able to do fighter versus fighter, something very, very similar to kind of FanDuel and stuff of that nature.
Well, real quick, I'll get you out of here with this, Jessica. Of course, the main event of Submission Underground 2 is Dan Henderson against John Jones. I wanted to get your thoughts on that grappling match.
I mean, I really don't have much to say about it because I don't really know what – I've never seen both of them grapple. I've seen them both fight, but I don't know how it's going to go grappling. I'm totally going to be watching as a fan.
She is Jessica I. She will be taking on Miesha Tate at Submission Underground 2, which will stream live at flowgrappling.com on December 11th. That's a Sunday coming up here again at flowgrappling.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at Jessica Evil Eye. And Jessica, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it and look forward to your match on Sunday.
Awesome. Thank you.
Once again, that was Jessica Evil Eye right here on Beyond the Cage. Once again, thanks for Jessica I for coming back on the program and talking about her match against Miesha Tate at Submission Underground 2 this weekend. Getting into Bellator, Bellator held 2 events this weekend, Bellator 166 and Bellator 167, both from the WinStar World Resort and Casino in Oklahoma. Starting first with the action on Friday night at Bellator 166 on Spike TV. Started first with a catchweight bout at 195 pounds, was supposed to be at middleweight, but kind of got moved around. Chris Honeycutt, a guy who has fought in Bellator in the welterweight division against Ben Ryder, who came into this fight with a pretty accomplished record, 17-1, has so far put a record together in Bellator of 3-1 heading into this fight. His only loss coming to Francisco France back at Bellator 146, that was November of last year. He was victorious in his only appearance so far in 2016 for Bellator, defeating AJ Matthews, which was a pretty big victory for him. Now taking on Chris Honeycutt in this fight, like I said, a guy who has fought some in the welterweight division. Honeycutt is coming off of 3 consecutive victories after having his no contest kind of back and forth bout there with Paul Bradley. I remember that ended up as a no contest. There was an accidental clash of the heads with a cut. They rematched, and then he got knocked out in just 40 seconds by Paul Bradley in the rematch that was in January of this year. But really, besides that little hiccup in 2015 and early 2016, his overall have a record of 5-1 in Bellator with just the 1 loss. But he's beaten some pretty solid guys, most recently in Matt Secor and Mikhail Parlo heading into this fight against Ryder. Kind of interesting, he did want to move up the weight class, but he moved up and really dominated. A guy who has fought almost his whole career in Ryder, a guy that you would say is probably a little bit of a bigger middleweight, even with the catchweight bout of 195. A guy who also is a very strong grappler. Couldn't really get that grappling off, and when it came to the feet, you could still that Ryder, despite having, this being his 20th professional bout, doesn't have as much stand-up skills. And Honeycutt, I thought, just did a really good job of keeping it standing, really being in Ryder's face, denying the takedowns, and he even mixed a couple of takedowns as well. I just thought this was one of he's had some pretty good performances inside the Bellator cage. You look at his last fight, but I thought this was a really good fight against a pretty solid guy in Ben Ryder. So if he wants to stick at middleweight, I think he can do it. He's going to, really what he's going to be giving up is a little bit of the height and reach to most of these guys. Strength-wise, I think he's pretty strong, and obviously he'll gain a little bit of speed advantage as well, not having to cut those extra 15 pounds. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, Ryder, while a solid opponent, he's not an elite guy by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a good test for a guy like Chris Honeycutt. Again, only his 10th professional, actually his 11th professional fight. Next bout of the evening was in the bantamweight division. Of course, this weekend really dominated by the Bellator bantamweights. This fight, maybe not quite a number 1 contender bout, but the winner definitely puts themselves in a pretty good position as a former bantamweight champion Marcus Galvão took on L.C. Davis. It was a split decision, but I thought L.C. Davis did not really have a good performance, to be honest. I thought Galvão did a really good job controlling the range striking, and actually really surprised me with his grappling. Not to say Galvão's a bad grappler or anything. Even though he only has 1 submission win to his credit, a guy that definitely has a pretty good jiu-jitsu background, I would have thought L.C. Davis, a pretty solid wrestler in his own right,
would be able to kind of stifle any attacks and maybe take the fight to the ground with him being on top, but really wasn't the case. I thought Galvão was really attacking with his grappling. I really thought he was controlling the cage for the most part of this fight, and I really thought he threw LC Davis off his game. I was kind of surprised actually to hear a split decision. I really probably would have gave this fight 30-27 for Marcos Galvão. I really did not think LC Davis did much offensively, and I always thought he was being reactive instead of being proactive in his attack, and was really on the defensive a lot in this fight, and kind of surprised it came down to a split. But for Galvão, obviously he's already fought the champion Dantas twice, has gotten beat pretty bad twice. Maybe a third match will happen, I'm not sure, but for LC Davis, a guy that after his start to Bellator here had a really nice 3-win winning streak. Of course, he had that excellent fight against Hideo Tokoro back in March of last year. Now he's taken on a couple of the elite guys in Joe Warren and Marcos Galvão and has just kind of fallen short. Now, that's not to say, injuries or anything might not happen. He could still get a shot at the title eventually, especially, like I said, Dantas has now beaten Joe Warren. Again, you make a case he beat him the first time. I don't think we're probably going to see a Warren Dantas 3. I don't see that happening. We probably won't see a Galvão Dantas 3. So that could open a door for a guy like LC Davis, even though he has lost against Galvão and Joe Warren, if he can get 1 or 2 wins together. But for Galvão, this was a really nice performance by him, considering how poor his title defense attempt was against Dantas earlier this year. Next fight of the evening was in the featherweight division as Ray Wood took on A.J. McKee, and we really saw a different A.J. McKee in this one. We saw a more methodical, a more conservative, and I would say a more grappling-based A.J. McKee than we have seen in the past fights in Bellator. Now, I don't know if that's all because of his opponent in Ray Wood, who was a pretty solid prospect in his own right, who came into this fight with 7-2, had fought up a weight class against Adam Piccolotti in Bellator, who we all know is pretty good. He just defeated Brandon Gertz in a 15-minute decision victory. So losing to him back at Bellator 154, really not that big a deal. Had only previously to coming to Bellator had only lost to Anthony Morrison, and that ended up being a 5th-round fight. So you knew this kid was going to be a test for A.J. McKee, the young man at 21 years old. And considering all his fights had been first-round finishes, had not been to the 3rd round since his amateur days, which he had a pretty extensive amateur record. He actually had 8 amateur bouts and went 8-1 as an amateur, dating from August of 2012 to July of 2014, before finally turning pro in April of 2015, where he's fought under the Bellator banner exclusively since then, now being a perfect 6-0. This was his first professional bout to go into the 2nd round, and really I think this was a nice evolution for A.J. McKee, a guy, of course, had finished all of his opponents in the 1st round against a tough guy like this who, had some striking skills, who had some submission skills, and I think for A.J. McKee to kind of dig deep, go through some adversity, go through some challenges on the feet and in the grappling game, to come out and kind of ride a very dominant decision, I think is a good sign. Now, sure, it wasn't the flashy and exciting A.J. McKee we have seen in his previous 5 bouts under Bellator, but I think sometimes you need a fight like this, especially for a young guy like this, 21 years old. He's fought in Bellator the whole time, and probably the best guy he's ever fought, to be honest. And I think having a victory like that is good. It's good for your maturation process. And yeah, you got to know every victory and every fight you're going to be in is not going to be a 1st-round knockout. And sometimes you got to dig deep and get the victory. Not every fight's going to be your greatest performance, or even a fight maybe you deserve to win. But being able to kind of adjust like on the fly and do what you have to do to get a victory, I think is very nice for A.J. McKee. And for Ray Wood, I think a guy that definitely has a future as well. Obviously, he kind of has to shore up his grappling aspect. Maybe didn't expect McKee to be as grappling heavy. Obviously, if you look at combined fight time he's had in Bellator, maybe it's, he's had 5 fights that equaled maybe 1 fight. So it's really hard, I think, to kind of prepare a game plan and expect to go 15 minutes with a guy who's never been there. So I think for Ray Wood, I think it was obviously a little bit of a learning experience, but I think he's definitely a guy that will be a factor at 145. And for McKee, this was another strong test. I think beating a guy like Ray Wood, now you start to put him in the upper echelon of Bellator. There was a guy who fought at 167, we'll get to in a minute, and John Teixeira. He starts creeping it up in that career, like a Henry Corrales, John Teixeira, Emmanuel Sanchez, Justin Lawrence. Now he's starting to kind of get in that Bubba Jenkins. So he's starting to kind of get in that next upper echelon. So I wouldn't be surprised if, I would say even maybe 1 or 2 more victories, if he can keep this rolling, he could possibly be fighting for the title sometime late next year. I really do think that. The main event of Bellator 166, of course, this weekend really belonged to the bantamweights as Eduardo Dantas put his title on the line for the first time since re-becoming champion back in July of this year, defeating Marcus Galvão, rematching Joe Warren, the man who took his title away originally, and that was back in October of 2014, so nearly 2 years later. They rematched. Of course, they had a very close and hotly contested first match that went all 5 rounds, with Joe Warren pulling out a unanimous decision. This time around, however, it was all Eduardo Dantas, very reminiscent of his win over Marcus Galvão to recapture the title earlier this year. Dantas had complete control of the range, and I think with the exception of maybe a late takedown in the 4th or 5th round, I think he had one in the 5th, and obviously the subsequent point taking away from Dantas due to a low kick, this was really all his fight. I mean, Joe Warren could not get inside at all. Dantas was moving in and out of the pocket flawlessly, was pumping the jab a lot, landed some right hands as well. I mean, he only threw about, I think they said, 218 strikes, so a little less than 10 a minute. So it's not like he was completely blitzing Joe Warren, but it was that constant threat of the punches and the fact that Warren wasn't able to do anything to get inside to combat that reach and overall speed and foot movement of Dantas that really got this fight for Eduardo. And if it wasn't apparent that Joe Warren was done after his loss to Darren Caldwell, I think this proves it, that he's old. I mean, a couple years ago, he could still get in there and still kind of match speed and pace, but right now, 13 years older than Eduardo Dantas, he can't move at that speed anymore. And Dantas right now is not only in the prime of his life, but definitely in the prime of his career, and he is no doubt one of the best bantamweights in the world. It'd be nice somehow if he could take on Marlon Moraes or Dominic Cruz or TJ Dillashaw or Cody Garbrandt, or even Thomas Almeida. This guy, I think, can mix it up with anyone in the world and can be successful. I honestly believe that. His physical skill set being 5'10", and the way he can move in and out of range, I think he would give any of those gentlemen a run for their money. And unfortunately, I think Moraes is sticking with World Series of Fighting. I would have loved for Bellator to somehow get him. That would have been a huge fight, Moraes against Eduardo Dantas. Dantas, however, will have a tough test in Darren Caldwell coming up, which we'll get to here in just a minute. But for Joe Warren, it was a valiant effort, and his last kind of big chance at maybe ending his career on a championship note. Maybe he comes back for one more, but at this point in time, he's just not at the same level anymore as someone like Eduardo Dantas, who definitely is one of the best in the world, and maybe is poised to make a really good title run here in his second run as Bellator champion. Getting over to Bellator 167, again, same venue on Saturday on Spike TV at the WinStar World Casino and Resort there in Thackerville, Oklahoma. Once again, 4 fights on the main card. Started first with a amazingly quick knockout by Chia Njokuani over Andrew Fiallo. And unfortunately for Njokuani, a little bit marred despite how good this performance was and win was just 21 seconds into the first round. He did miss weight, so that may set him back a little bit despite how spectacular this was. But Andre was kind of rushing it a little bit. It looked like Chia kind of was throwing a punch, maybe a little bit of a forearm kind of clash there. And was able to go out there and get the victory, and really just stunning fashion. Really incredible. It was really quick. I kind of had to rewind it 2 or 3 times to see the shot that Fiallo caught coming in, but man, incredible. And then he goes there and gets the finish. They kind of mentioned, oh, did he slip? Did he fall? Is he hurt? Jimmy Smith and Sean Gran. And then, of course, Big John had to come in and stop this one at 21 seconds. So nice bounce-back win for Chia, who I believe had fought Douglas Lima previously. Obviously, Douglas Lima now recapturing the welterweight championship, so it doesn't look like that bad of a loss. But, oh, that's right. That fight got canceled against Douglas Lima. That's right. So actually, he continues his undefeated streak here in Bellator, now 3-0 with his second consecutive knockout. He has not had a blemish on his record since a no contest back when he fought in RFA. That was due to an illegal elbow to the spine. That was back in March of 2014. But other than that, has rattled off 6 consecutive victories. He's beat some tough guys like Fiallo, Ricky Rainey, as well as Gilbert Smith along the way, and has not lost, though, since March of 2013. That was to Jeremy Kimball. Once again, that was back in RFA. So he's had a really nice role here, and really the only thing is weight. Obviously, that weight kind of hurt him a little bit. He's a guy that I think Fernando Gonzalez would be a good matchup with, coming off the loss there to Michael Page. As far as the top of the welterweight division, I think we may see a Brendan Ward-Michael Page matchup coming up next. That could be a possible number 1 contender fight in the 170 division, because I think Rory McDonald should just get the fight against Douglas Lima. Now, possibly, maybe Chia moves up and gets Korzhikov. Maybe Rory fights Korzhikov first. I don't know. They have a lot of options here in welterweight, but Chia definitely, with now his third consecutive victory, definitely makes himself a force in this division. Oh, I forgot Paul Daly's still around as well. That would be an excellent fight, too. Next fight of the evening was in the women's flyweight division, as Eilumye McFarlane took on Emily Decotis, a possible kind of title eliminator of sorts, as both of these fighters are looking to become the first ever Bellator flyweight women's champion. Of course, Eilumye coming off her exciting win over Rebecca Ruth back in June of this year, submitting the hometown favorite, and I think just overall favorite in the second round there. And, of course, Gordina Emily Ducati coming into this bout after her awesome armbar victory in her last fight over Kenya Silva. So you knew this was going to be a good fight, as Decotis was 4-1, 4-0 for Eilumye, and really this was kind of the fight you expected. A lot of grappling. When it stayed striking, I think Ducati was a little better of the two, but this fight primarily was taking place with both fighters grappling. First round was close, but I think that drop with the uppercut probably gave Decotis the first round. The second 2 rounds were close, but I think towards the end there, especially in the first round, I think Decotis started to lose a bit of steam, and I think Eilumye, probably a little stronger, the grappler of the two, I think was able to keep her momentum, keep the conditioning, and get in more advantageous positions. Had a couple of nice submissions and sweep attempts there in the third round, and I think definitely deserving of the victory there in Oklahoma. Obviously, Ducati being the hometown favorite there. And another nice performance by McFarlane. I think sooner or later, they're getting a lot of these female fights. She's never lost as a professional or as an amateur. So if you go back to her amateur start, which was only 2 years ago, she's 10-0. If you include her amateur record, 10-0 inside of 2 years. Has fought for Bellator since August of last year. Has finished two of the 4 fights in Bellator. So I think sooner or later Bellator is going to have to make a decision here for their women's division. Obviously, their heavyweight division being a division that needs to be sorted out as well. But Eilumye is definitely a girl that could compete for their first women's flyweight championship. Co-main event of Bellator 167 was in the featherweight division as 2 former Ultimate Fighter contenders. John Teixeira of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil against Justin Lawrence of the Ultimate Fighter Season 12. Very close first round between these two. I thought Justin Lawrence did a pretty good job in the first round. He was moving in and out. I thought he was countering well. Of course, he had some nice kicks from Teixeira. But really, as rounds 2 and 3 progressed, Teixeira kept on finding a home for that kick and was able to do a good job of being the aggressor, keeping Justin Lawrence, on his back foot, pedaling around, circling around, really forcing him to counter, which is not really Justin Lawrence's forte. He's a little better at moving forward, and I think getting Justin Lawrence off that forward movement, making him kind of turn to a counter striker, and then being able to repeatedly land those kicks. Lawrence was doing nothing to counter those kicks. He was not checking them. He was not circling them. He's not trying to catch them. Didn't want to take Teixeira down at all, who had 10 submission victories coming into this one. Had only lost once in his whole entire career. That was back in the UFC. Only got one shot in the UFC coming off the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, which is kind of unfortunate because it was a split decision. I remember that fight. Very close fight. Kind of unfortunate he never got another chance in the UFC, but since then has fought in Shooto Brazil and got signed by Bellator back in October of 2014. Has been nothing short of fantastic, as he has now racked up 4 victories in Bellator. He did fight once outside of the organization back in December of last year. This is his first fight in Bellator since that win. That was at EFC 17, and just those leg kicks with the straight combination, the forward movement. Justin Lawrence there towards the end could barely walk and just really had no answer. And John Teixeira, with a win over a pretty accomplished striker in Justin Lawrence, definitely moves himself up the featherweight rankings. I mentioned Justin Lawrence taking on a guy like AJ McKee moving forward. I think that would be a tremendous fight. I think a fight against Emmanuel Sanchez or Henry Corrales, or if Pitbull doesn't get the title fight, obviously I think Daniel Weichel against Daniel Strauss most likely will be the match to make for the featherweight championship moving forward. Obviously, Pat Curran is still out there as well, but John Teixeira, with this win over Justin Lawrence, definitely puts himself on the Bellator radar in what is arguably their best division, the 145 division. The main event of the evening, a rematch, as these two met in this very building earlier this year. Darrion Caldwell against Joe Taimanglo. Taimanglo was supposed to get a shot at the bantamweight championship after submitting Darrion Caldwell in the third round earlier this year. However, as fans know, Taimanglo missed weight for that. And so with that occurrence happening, Bellator decided to not give Taimanglo a shot. Instead, they made an instant rematch with Caldwell, instead giving Joe Warren a shot at the bantamweight championship, of course, which was the previous night. So Taimanglo, trying to repeat what he did just about 5 months ago, wasn't able to do so, much to his effort. He tried a lot of chokes. He tried a Volant Flute choke. He had a Peruvian necktie, several guillotines. He definitely put the pressure on Caldwell. This was not as easy of a fight as their first matchup, where I think Taimanglo was really kind of sitting back more. I think he was kind of waiting to get up and wasn't trying as hard for the submissions in the first round. But after getting that submission victory the first time, he really tried hard for them. But overall, Darrion Caldwell was still able to get takedowns very easily, was still able to pass guard, get in half guard, and control really well. Despite the submission attempts, he was the one being on top. He was the one doing damage, and he was the one controlling the fight. And so, while Taimanglo had a couple of opportunities to finish this fight once again, they were too few and far between to overtake the overall dominating and smothering style of the former NCAA national champion. And Caldwell gets his very deserved title shot. And now, normally, like Dantas is a huge bantamweight, but this is one of the few guys in the world that is just as big as Eduardo Dantas. And you add in his extremely athletic and strong frame with his wrestling background against the hand speed and foot movement and overall just amazing striking ability of Eduardo Dantas. I think this is going to make for an incredible fight come 2017, and you got two guys that are both in the prime of their careers. Both are young, both are hungry. They're almost the same age. I mean, Caldwell's 28, Dantas is 27. This has the makings of a classic championship trilogy, and one that could be possibly like the next kind of Chandler Alvarez here for Bellator. So I'm really excited for their matchup coming up later this year, and I think they need this. Like I said, Galvo and Warren, guys who have been around for a couple of years, are starting to get old. Pat Curran has dropped off. Or Pat Curran wasn't in the bantamweight division, but Rafael Silva, who was there for a while. They had a couple of their bantamweights drop off a little bit. It's not as strong as it was a few years ago, but if they can get a great fight between Caldwell and Dantas, it could make for an exciting series of fights moving forward here in the next couple of years. And, of course, who knows, maybe they could still get a guy like Marlon Moraes or maybe even a Bibiano Fernandez. Who knows? And, of course, a lot of guys with the union and stuff that they just formed in MMA and whatnot. A lot of those guys are repping the Bellator banner. So who knows if any of those guys decide to move over to Bellator, which seems to be a little more fighter-friendly. So we shall see moving forward. But good performance by Caldwell and deserving of getting a title shot at 167. Once again, thanks to Jean Vellante for coming on the program and talking about his fight at UFC Albany. I also like to thank my partners at TopRatedMMA.com, the Facebook page MMA Fight Club, my great friends running the excellent mixed martial art forums at TheMMACommunity.com, my great friend AJ Hiller. They actually changed this now, MMAsignatures.co. So if you want the number one selection in the world for MMA memorabilia, go to MMAsignatures.co, the new website there for MMA Signatures. I'll also like to thank Flying Brian J., Izzy Garcia, Adam Nelson, Gorilla the Bear, as well as for their support here on Beyond the Cage as well. So look out for some more videos this week here, the first full week of December. I have Jessica I coming up, talk about the Ultimate Fighter 24. Of course, UFC 206, UFC Albany, Submission Underground 2 with Jessica I coming up this weekend as well. And there's a Bellator event over in Italy as well. So a lot of combat sport action coming. Oh, and of course, Glory Collision and Glory 36 are coming up this weekend as well, so I'll be excited to talk about those fights as well. So, once again, I am your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham and Instagram at TheJimGraham. And once again, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.